everyone. We're back with episode 6 of Is Podcast Ko Kya Naam Doon? That always trips me up, but we are actually very excited for this episode. I'll reveal why in a minute, but I did want to mention that we are now on a few podcast apps, the main one being Spotify. We will be sure to post the links to every platform that this is available on in the YouTube description. Also, wherever we generally post the link to the podcast. But yeah, super excited to have like an audio only option, that to Spotify, because I spend probably 90% of my life with the app running. So this feels official now. What do you think?
I'm just excited. Obviously, you guys can't see, but I was like, my hands were having their own life in the background of being all excited and chirpy. So, guys, we are so excited to be connected with you on YouTube, Anchor, and Spotify. Please let us know how you feel like it. And don't forget to give us feedbacks. We appreciate feedbacks a lot because we are like really zero level experience in podcasting.
Yep. All right. So now that we have that out of the way, I'm very excited to have a third member on the podcast today. We have a guest. It's probably someone you all know if you've been in the IPK fandom for a while now. She probably precedes me in the fandom, which is saying something because I feel ancient. But I'm very excited to welcome a dear friend and a fellow IPK enthusiast, Bingala.
Jab life jingalala to I bingalala. I'm a big fan of her work. Just saying, Morning Theft is one of my most favorite OSs. And before this becomes a 1 hour discussion on how much I love her work, my dearest B, how do you feel being over here?
Hi, Arnav. I'm so honored to be welcomed to this. I don't think a lot of you know, but I listen to this podcast on a regular basis. And there are times I will sit on the podcast on mute, listening to them run their magic. I truly enjoy it. So I felt honored when they asked me. No. I insisted that I wanted to be a part of this today. Whether or not I have something to contribute, I just wanted to be here. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, I mean, before she insisted, we had already asked. So I think technically we did request her to be here, though request is a very weird word to use because B and I have been friends for close to a decade now. And I think I would call it more of a demand than a request. So anyway, instead of our usual catch-up chit-chat, I thought I would ask B a few questions. How did you discover IPK and what made you actually start watching it?
This is always a fun story. IPK is the only serial I've ever watched, and it's still the only serials I've watched, and it remains my favorite. I was at my older sister's house, and I hear my aunt, I think the IPK was running its first week or something, and I go in, and I hear my aunt screaming. Arnav had one of his episodes, his diabetic episodes, and I hear my aunt screaming, "Give him some sugar. This is not how you treat diabetes. Give him some sugar." And I'm like, what are they watching? And I'm like, oh, he's pretty. Then I sat down and never got up. That's how I got into IPK. And that was never recovered from it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, she briefly recovered for about 3 or 4 years, and then I fell back down the rabbit hole, and I was like, you must write me something. Again, a demand. And because she's my friend and she cannot escape my demands, she was like, sure. And here we are again. So I take full credit for her getting back into the fandom. Please direct all your thanks my way. Okay, so my follow-up question to that, what actually made you start writing?
That's actually a very good question. There's this track for anyone who has watched it, if you're still watching it. You remember, this is just after Arnav had married Khushi, and he had, we'll just be polite and say, repositioned her in the poolside. I mean, I have a lot to say about that topic, but we'll get there someday. And I thought, no matter what you do, this is probably not how you treat a wife. I mean, I don't personally have a wife or a husband, but I imagine this is not how you treat your partner. So I thought, I'm going to fix this. The storytelling is not going the way I wanted. Therefore, I started my first story, which was a one-shot. It wasn't the greatest. I think someone told me that it focused more on stuff that they wore than anything else. But that's how I started writing. And it just created its own world afterwards.
One I really enjoy getting lost in, to be honest with you. S has already had her turn. I will just be very brief because we are friends and will be very awkward and I'm not good at giving compliments. But I enjoy how well she writes slice of life stories, which I personally think are the hardest thing to write because I don't know, how do you make normal existing exciting? I have not figured that out in life and certainly not in writing. So yeah, she does that really well. And I enjoy reading her stuff. And I will take this opportunity to say I need a new OS. I need a new hit. So get writing.
You write one, I'll write yours.
Fuck. Okay. I walked into that one. But anyway, I am not going to respond to it because I'm making a podcast. I'm too busy making a podcast to write. Shri, do you have any questions for me?
I don't have any questions. I just want to let everyone know that I feel I'm between Shark and Salman right now, okay? Because these two guys are my favorite writers. I'm like a kid when I started reading their work and I went gaga over them, and now I am sitting with my two most favorite IPK writers. Matlab, I am dhak-dhaking and acid-eating both. I don't care if that's not English. I'm just like, my halat is very kharab. Just saying. Just saying. But B, the question that I had for you is, I mean, obviously this is a 9-year-old fandom. What is the one thing that makes you stick with it, with the story?
I'm going to ask you a question to follow up, which will give you my answer, I guess. You, because your background in filmmaking, because your interest in all kinds of serials that you watch, have you come across a story that stuck to you? Have you come across a story that was so non-typical, if with the most common tropes known to mankind, that's managed to stick to you even after a decade?
In this specific genre? No. Do you need an explanation?
I think this podcast is an explanation enough, the existence of it. So yeah, I guess we're all here because it's a show that stuck to us for a decade. There's really not I mean, the exploration of why we enjoy it in each episode, I think, is you get the sense of why we enjoy it. I'm not creating a podcast for, I don't want to insult any shows, but any other Indian TV show. For example, IPK3. I will move on before I get chappal thrown at me.
To be fair, there have been shows that have caught my fleeting attention, but for a sustained number of episodes and on a larger scale, I always say that every television show has bullshit because the channels and producers kind of force their dearest writers to produce a movie's worth of content every week. So imagine that people take 3 months to create a 2.5 hour product, and they have 7 days to create a 2.5 hour product. So over that, I feel every Indian television show has some crap and good parts. And usually television shows average to like 50 or 40% of great stuff and 50 and 60% of what crap. IPK is one of the shows that's like 70 to 80% good stuff and 20 to 30 utter crap. And trust me, that is a very rare number to strike in Indian televisions. Apart from sitcoms, I think they did really good with some sitcoms and finite series, especially in the 90s, and a few finite series now.
Right. I mean, IPK certainly did front load on its 70 to 80% of the good stuff. You will see as the podcast goes along. But now that we had some introduction to B, and Shri has revealed how much older we are than her, we can move on to recording the actual content of the podcast before she, I don't know, insults us in other ways. She's making the Khushi, oh my God, face. All right. As usual, we're going to be covering a track today. The track we'll be covering today will start off with Khushi's new adventures into being a working woman. So we'll start off with Khushi, entering AR. We're going to go through a lot of stuff today, actually. We'll go through like Arnav and Khushi's meeting in the office. We'll talk about Payal and Akash meeting for the first time, the contract, and even delve into the first couple of challenges Arnav throws Khushi's way. having said that, let's jump right in. Shri, what didn't you like?
Well, we're still in the lovely zone of what we did not like is really less compared to what we liked. So I'll just speak on the technical front because I just have one issue on the production aspect of it. Wardrobe, as you have all might have heard, I'm very appreciative of what the wardrobe offers given its budget and time it was made and everything. I don't know what the hell went wrong when they were designing the extras in the office. I think there was some complete disasters going on. And I think some of the people were normal, but especially the two side characters that we're supposed to focus on, Sim and Pam. They're supposed to be Lavanya, who, by the looks of it, looks like a PR or marketing head of AR. Her Sim, I think Sim is the sillier one, right? She's the receptionist. My God, I cannot imagine walking into a Sabyasachi and finding a woman dressed up and speaking like that on the reception. It is a comedy that did not work out for me because her clothes were terrible. Her clothes looked like a 16-year-old teen who does not know fashion on top of that. I mean, they know how to dress up Lavanya, so clearly they know corporate style. But Sim wearing jeans and a weird yellow color top with clips in her hair, please. So I think there was some issue in the wardrobe and makeup when it came to Sim and Pam, Sim especially. And okay, I understand that now the jeans culture and everything is there, but it's kind of like they stuck out as a sore thumb, as opposed to it's not like good jeans, it's like bad. Yeah. And especially it's a fashion house. Had this been any other industry, I would have been less picky about it. Like if but this is a fashion house, and I'm sure fashion houses like Sabyasachi or Manish Malhotra or Anita Dongre, whatever, they must be having some sort of a dress code in their office. And I'm like, dude, this is what do you call it? Indradhanush, rainbow. So yeah. Sorry, I was very salty on that. Very sorry about that.
Well, I have something to add to this. While I won't say the clothes, you know how I feel about clothes, and I get really. If you've read my work, and I don't mean to interject that, I really like clothes, and I absolutely hated that. But I think my major problem with Sim and Pam's character is there's this part, and I think they tried to introduce the aspect of elitism to an extent, but not. I don't like linguistical elitism, especially in subcultures like ours where that's already a problem, the whole colonization. I will not go into that. There's this part where Sim, the silly one, yellow top, Sim says something in English, and Lavanya turns and say, if you can't speak English, why do you even say it? Why do you bother? Like, what work culture is that?
Yeah, actually, I made a note. I take notes when I'm watching this now. Like, I don't know, I never studied for my school, but I made a note of La saying, don't speak in English if you can't. And she follows it up by saying, you sound Chinese, which is the first instance of, I guess we could, xenophobia, maybe racism. I don't know how to categorize it. It's not racism because it's not rooted in race, but you get what I mean. Like there's that call out, there's that weird Khushi dressing up late, like much later on in the show, that also does this. So this is like we like, you really need to check your biases, and like, you know, you need to have some sensitivity checks when you write something. And I understand this was 10 years ago, but this was still a problem 10 years ago. It still is now. So I just have a problem with that. Like, this is truly the thing that I didn't like in, I don't know, these few episodes.
I agree, especially the Chinese part. I don't know if I noticed it 10 years ago, or maybe I forgot it, but when I watched it again recently, today, and I kept on wondering, how's that possible? But yeah, I think that's one of my bigger problems, that they played off comedy as something cruel. If you see the interaction between Sim and Pam, Sim and Lavanya, I'm not even bringing Kushi into this picture yet. You see that how they treat Sim, which is supposed to be a comedy playoff, is it's a very uncomfortable look at how we perceive elitism, how we perceive class.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a good reminder that we like full of color isn't a broad enough term when it comes to some of these things, because we are very capable of being judgmental in our own subcategory as well. So yeah, something that bothered me. I hope writing has evolved since then and things like this don't pass muster anymore, but significant call out on that thing.
Absolutely. Like my only technical part was the wardrobe. And I think it always bothered me because I think that people from small cities don't know how to dress. And if anyone ever cared to watch, I think Supermodel of the Year, Ya Fir Aisa Kuch on MTV, they would understand that a lot of models actually do come from small cities. So, dot, dot, dot. And also, like going to the story point, my very first point was exactly what Rids and B said right now, that the entire Sim and Pam was, I would call, classic case of bad comedy. That they think this would be funny given usual stereotypes, but what they don't realize is that they're reinforcing some really problematic ideals of elitism and things like that. And I know that they do kind of address this to be the devil's advocate. They do kind of address this where Khushi tells him that you should try to be proud of who you are and be proud of your roots, but it's very vague, to be honest, compared to the amount of problematic things that go on throughout the office.
Yes, they do, but it also goes back to like something that you called out last episode of like, I think Kushi tells Sim that, we'll discuss this when it comes up, but I just did want to call it out, that she tells Sim that she should be proud of who she is, because she's trying to cover up her like traditional aspects of who she is. Kushi is judgmental when it comes to someone dressing in like a quote unquote Western fashion. I think that like there is still that divide of like, oh, it's not explicit, but it's conveyed that being modern is bad, being traditional is right. You should be who you are as long as it's under these parameters. That goes back to something that S was mentioning in the last episode.
Yeah, absolutely. This advice does not come up to Nani ji when we never have a scene of Khushi telling Nani ji that Lavanya should be proud of who she is. Kind of, this will lead to the second point that I dislike about this whole office track, is what Ritz kind of alludes to, is that I don't have that much of an issue with Khushi being a judgmental prick as much as I have an issue with us agreeing with her. Like, we're supposed to agree with Khushi, we're supposed to sympathize and understand and be like, yeah, Khushi is right in thinking about that people with short skirts or short names, essentially like their morals are as much as the length of their name or skirts. The cringe that gets in, I am a person who's uncomfortable with short clothes, and this is coming from a person who does get weirded out wearing sleeveless stuff. But for the life of me, I could not agree with Khushi's all of those antics. And you see this extended, like, it's not that Khushi getting a sudden shock of being a new atmosphere, it is extended to her whole judgment of this workplace. She literally judges this workplace. And I don't, like, even when she gets the job, I'm not really sure she gets the job when she lights Devi Maya ka candle. But literally her whole rant, she's like, oh, look at what kind of a place this is. They don't know how to light a candle for you. And I'm just like, excuse me, you are jumping from one conclusion to another about a corporate workspace because of how people dress up, how anyone might have not lit up a candle in front of. The fact that there is a temple shows that there is some sort of respect towards the divine. So it's okay if there is not a candle burning. Like, seriously, Khushi? And I think what pisses me off more is that we're all supposed to be agreeing with whatever she's doing. And I just find her plain stupid at this point. And I would have been okay. I'm not saying it was wrong to show this. Had they shown this to be Khushi's character flaw, like they show Arnav's quick judgment to be a character flaw.
I have something to add to that. Not exactly Kushi's situation or her thought process. I mean, it's wrong. There's nothing I can add to it. There's nothing I can do. I can help justify this as saying this is a small town girl with very little life experience, very young. But I personally think it's wrong. Having said that, that moment when she lights the diya though and starts the whole sprinkler. I work in a corporate environment. I work in clients. I work in wooing clients. The whole concept of blowing a contract because of one employee's mistake is still horrifying to me. I know it's supposed to be a comedy track, and maybe it was 10 years ago for me. I watched it today and I felt panic rising at what I would have experienced if contracts like this takes about 70 to 80 hours on a daily basis for months to put together. That's Khushi Kumari Gupta for all the wonderful things she is. This was an actual asshole act. I'm sorry. I'm probably getting flamed, and I'm so sorry I'm messing this up for you, but I needed to add this.
Counterpoint to that, I think I would put the blame for that happening solely on Arnav, given the fact that it's one candle being lit in a very open space that should not have generated enough smoke to set off the sprinkler system in the entire building. I mean, I put the blame on Arnav because I like blaming Arnav. Aside from that, I think, it's his office. His sprinkler systems are apparently shit. So look, there was a mandir there was a diya there. Khushi just went to light it. It was available already. It's not like she went out and brought one. So someone like Anjali or someone must have done that before. It's just Khushi's luck. And I wrote, my note was Devi Maya literally raining all over Arnav's parade when he says that, I forget his exact dialogue, but he's bragging about nothing happens in this office that's like out of line. Everything happens on time. Everything's perfect. And I think Devi Maya was having like a maybe not very exciting day. And she was like, oh, you think? Rain. Yeah, I mean, yes, it's horrifying that they probably lost that contract, but that's also not Khushi's fault, in my opinion.
Factual correction. I don't think they lost the contract. I think Lavanya handles the situation because she says client ko kuch samjha ke to bhej diya. So it means that they did not lose the contract according to canon. But yeah, I think what happens is that this is one of the earliest signals to Khushi that intention does not excuse your consequence. So there are these some aspects of Khushi that grow out as larger problems throughout the show. I'm not getting to see. People might think that it's not that I like Arnav more because he's handsome, or because I associate with him more. Not at all. I think I'm completely okay with the way Arnav is behaving because the show is telling us that his behavior is wrong, and therefore there is room for growth, and therefore we will be witnessing this character to change. But I think my trouble rises that we don't see any sort of that for Khushi. Like there's Khushi is a small town girl. Her being shocked, her being judgmental of people in short skirts, absolutely fine. I've seen people do it, and I'm sure maybe some point in my life, I might have also judged people when they were different from me. But I think the fact that we never get a payoff to this, that Khushi, I think we can later argue that within the lines, Khushi has matured and understood different kinds of outfits and styles better and become less judgmental. But we never get the hint that this is something that Khushi actively needs to work upon. And that gets me talking about judgments and things like that. Nani at this point is so much on my nerves. I cannot watch any of her scenes. Again, my biggest problem, I don't know if I'm the one perceiving this situation, is that Nani is so hell bent on finding out her kid's private life, on who her kid is dating, that she sends fake flowers home so as to Arnav can reveal who could have sent flowers to him. There are such shitty scenes that if I ever edited the show, I would just cut them right out of it. Because these are terrible scenes where Nani literally becomes very intrusive. I don't know if they're trying to pass it off for comedy or if they are telling us that Nani ji is being wrong in doing that. But I think just because you're older than someone, you do not have a right on their personal life, especially when it includes marriage. Anjali deals with this topic a little bit better because she realizes Arnav's reluctance with marriage might come across with his past and with the fact that he does not potentially see Lavanya as a partner as opposed to people should be marrying. But Nani, I don't get Nani at this point because she'd rather have her grandson marry some random traditional stranger than be in a relationship with a woman he very much understands.
Yes, very irritating. Again, you're shown this in the context of Arnav's unreasonable for wanting to have a private life, wanting to decide what's right for him. That's very much the tone of which it's given to you. I have two thoughts on this. There was either a character shift in Nani at some point, and she became the, like, head of the house in a more like subtle way. Like she didn't exert so much authority at one point of time. But I don't know if that was because Khushi came into Arnav's life and she saw Khushi as the right kind of partner for Arnav. I don't know if that's because they were right for each other, or if it was because Khushi was quote unquote traditional and sort of fell into the parameters of what Nani might have wanted for Arnav. The other part of it is I just find it extremely strange that you lost your daughter to a marriage that was built on unhappiness. She committed suicide to escape that. I just don't understand her stubbornness when it comes to marrying Arnav off, because if anything, she would be more cautious about who, like, her issue with Lavanya could have been that maybe she wasn't right for Arnav, for not for the reasons that she thinks. Maybe she just sees that they're not compatible, or it's a very imbalanced relationship, right? Maybe she could have, given what happened with her daughter, she could have seen that car crash coming from a while away, and that's why she opposes it. Like, they could have gone down that track, had the same level of drama, but had the character make more sense. I just have I don't understand her motivation for pushing Arnav into a marriage given his history.
While we're on the topic of Nani, in the episodes that we saw, did you see how she was? I know it's meant to be comedy, but her treatment of mommy is appalling. It's absolutely appalling. I mean, you cannot laugh at it as a woman or as a person. You cannot laugh at it. Like, at one point, she tells mommy that the goat is more important than her, or has smarter than her, something like that. I know it's supposed to be comedy, but that level of disrespect, a woman who's instilling the idea of values, of culture, of tradition, is definitely holding up certain traditions while completely forgetting other values. She's spying on her grandchildren, trying to redirect their lives. But on the other hand, she definitely is holding up the cultural and the traditional aspects of mother-in-lawhood, South Asian mother-in-lawhood, 120%.
Yeah, I'll say that's something that bothered me too, specifically because she only did it with mommy. Khushi also comes into the house as someone who works for them. I wouldn't say. I mean, even like you could categorize. Mommy calls herself like she used to be a servant or something. Khushi comes into the house in as lesser than, given the, like, if we are going off of these parameters that were set, then Khushi should also be ineligible to marry Arnav. And Payal, as her sister, should also be. They never kind of like dug into why Nani actually dislikes Mami. That's why I said there was a character shift, because she, like, when we get to Khushi, this like classism, elitism, it doesn't exist as much. Maybe it was just that she was the sass to Mami and Arnav is her grandchild, and maybe we are more forgiving one generation past, or whatever the reason might be. But there was definitely a tonal shift in Nani's character.
Yeah. And talking about tradition and patriarchy and crappy shit, one dialogue or one moment that I absolutely hated is, okay, I love the concept of marriage. There's no doubts over there. I love Manju auntie from The Office. Okay? Lovely lady. Woman supporting woman, you have my heart. But Manju auntie telling Khushi to consider the office as a sasural when the opposite is true is making me want to claw my hair out of my skull. Like, I am like, no. And I know that they did this whole dialogue. So, you come across some scenes or some dialogues and you understand that this whole scene or this whole dialogue has been constructed to basically deliver the last line, which is this whole thing has only been done to let Khushi think that, to put this terrible foreshadowing that Arnav is her pati. Legit, this is why this whole scene was constructed. It's terrible. It juts out of nowhere. Khushi is an unmarried woman. Had Khushi been a married woman, trying to work for the first time in her life, then we can understand Manju telling her, don't be worried because this is like your sasural only. Given that Khushi is already a married woman and she knows how a sasural functions, and this is how a sasural is. Khushi is an unmarried woman. उसे क्या पता होगा ससुराल क्या होता है, what's none is like this, saas who's always and the worst aspects of sasural, not even the best aspects, saas who always taunts you, nanad who have no better things to do in this planet, and pati, if you keep your pati happy then your sasural is set. It's like, first of all, I hate this because, very honest, a house is like a big company, not the opposite. A company is not like a house. No, not at all. And uske upar all of this crappy shit, it just got in my nerves so much. And that Khushi understands. Why would any woman understand the reference of what it is to be in a married household? I don't get it. I completely dislike that scene. I would get away with it if I would just like cut it off. If I could. It's a cringeworthy. It's bad comedy. It's cringy, and I mean, I know you're trying to reinforce that Khushi is someone who believes in marriage and everything, but I think they come across with this point much more beautifully in the later when she tells her sister, "Arey Gigi, you won't marry? What are you saying? Marriage is always about good saris and pretty things." That's very innocent and cute because that perfectly coincides with a girl's dreams of what it is to be married. But this dialogue in an office space, no. No.
I agree. Unsurprising, but I do agree. I think the reason some of these scenes stand out quite a bit more is that they have been so far very good at indicating stuff subtly, like that, like whole like, where is your Rajkumar? The helicopter flies over her head, or like Arnav like being in the car and Kushi driving past him, and you seeing her in the mirror. Like there's like these subtle ways they show that they're destined for each other. When they do something this in your face, it feels out of place and way too aggressive and unnecessary. So definitely agree that that was very strange. I have a couple of points that I wanted to also talk about. One, this is done well, but I do have a problem with it in that Arnav is shown as a character who thinks the world should dance on his tune. So this is very in character for him. But there's this part where later on, I think Arnav's like, I try to keep my like professional and personal life very separate. While we're in office, I'm the boss, and when in my personal life, you're my girlfriend, to Lavanya. Except there's this one scene when Arnav says French perfume se nahi mehnat se chalti hai to Lavanya in front of someone else. And I'm like, that's a dialogue you might get away with saying to your girlfriend. You don't say that to your employee. That for me like crosses the personal, like blurs the line between their personal and professional life a little bit. And I'm like, you set the rules and you're not following them. And I have a huge problem with relationships where one person has direct authority over the other. In this case, that exists. I could have been okay with it if that line was very stark between their professional and personal life, but this blurs it a bit, and I'm like, no, Arnav, nope.
I just wanted to add to what you were saying in terms of the lines being crossed, or rather Arnav making his own rules and then breaking them as he saw fit, would be the same, him yelling at Lavanya in front of everyone every time something goes wrong. If it were me, I'd be calling HR. Like, you're supposed to be my boss. Not that your boyfriend should be yelling at you. I think what pissed me off in that episode, one, we'll get to the rest, I'm sure, was when Arnav talks to Lavanya, and I think one of the things he alludes to is she can't do anything correctly. How do you perceive a relationship to work? How do you perceive a office relationship and a personal relationship to work if you treat her like a slave rather than a partner or an employee? Which both Arnav has problem with respect, and this was my first moment of wanting to slap him in this episode. I'll let Rids continue because I'm sure she'll bring up more moments.
that thing pissed me off. And the other thing I didn't like about, it's very hard to criticize Arnav for what he did, because you always know that they show it in the light of his character being wrong, which is plot driven. But I will say this: Arnav knew the door was open. He very much led Khushi to that ledge. He wanted her at his mercy. He knew what he was doing because he could see where they were going, and he kept walking her back in that direction. I Arnav is a dramatic ass, okay? I'm pretty sure he did all of this so he could have that dialogue where he says, "Gidna to tumhari fitrat mein hai." I mean, Khushi was like, "Let me go," and maybe he probably knew there were boxes underneath, but even then, as is saying he did. Maybe he did, but even then, a fall from that height would have hurt her. Like, she's bony as f. She could have broken an arm. He could have been sued to high hell if Khushi needed a friend like me who could be like, you can sue him for this, and this. I don't know if he was trying to act the hero at this point. I don't think that was his intention, but like him leading her there to have her at his mercy, I do have an issue with.
I don't think he was intending to say "Girna tumhari fitrat mein hai." I don't even think he thought he would drop her. I know I'm being the devil's advocate right now, but Arnav was going into that situation knowing that he'd prove to Khushi that she does need his help. Like, not his own, but also other people's kismat. And I think that's a fallacy in Arnav, and that's shown as a fallacy, so I have no problem with that. I think what he does not expect is for a woman like Khushi to tell him on his face, while she's at his mercy, that she'd rather fall instead of him saving her. And I think that's when Arnav is like, okay, then fall. I think he did see the cardboard, but I do not think he intended to drop her until and unless she said that line. He expected her to cry or quiver, and he, as he said, as we discussed in the previous episodes, Arnav has this, he has this crazed obsession for having the last word, for leaving the argument with the upper hand. And I think with Khushi slamming I was going to say divorce papers, I wish. No, with Khushi slamming the resignation or appointment letter on his table, she was leaving the argument with an upper hand. So he probably wanted to intimidate her enough so as to the argument is ended with him on the upper hand. But instead of that shift, Khushi seizes back the power when she's like, well, I'd rather fall than you help me. And he's like, oh, girna tumhari fitrat mein, and he leaves her hand. And he thinks he got the upper hand, which he does not. That's why a reason why I feel he feels very bothered after dropping her is he's supposed to feel like he got the upper hand in an argument, but he did not.
I don't think he's used to trading barbs with anyone. I think he's very used to like saying something and winning. Khushi kind of destroys that.
Yeah. And I think also the reason why the fall might feel a bit problematic, although I'm always okay with an argument becoming bigger and bigger due to substantial things. But I think the reason why the fall feels a little bit problematic is because it is not addressed as well it should have been, because it's a big thing. And like, you know, we're all very satisfied with the way the guest house turns out, because Khushi really gives him a blow for that. Like, her anger is in perfect match with what he's done. But I think with Khushi falling down a floor and everyone watching, and that never being brought up as a valid argument, or like what he did was terrible, I think that is where the issue arises, that the fall is actually not a safe thing. Like, even if, how did he know that the boxes were empty? What if they were not?
Yeah, maybe he doesn't rehearse his dialogues in the mirror. Although I could see him doing that. He is a dramatic ass. But yeah, it bothered me that, I don't know. There was something about that scene that just does not sit right with me. I'm pretty sure that either that or the very first scene is the one that I watched when I like the first time I watched the show, and I was like, I'm not watching it. That's pretty much it for like what I had for what I didn't like. B, anything we forgot? Anything else you'd like to add?
I mean, it's a little later down the lane, but I think we must pay homage to Buaji and her treatments of the sisters. Stark difference in treatments. I know it's a work track, and we're primarily focusing on it, but I just want to point out that the work track begun rather, for two specific reasons. One, she wants to throw 25,000 rupees to Arnav's face. Two, because she's worried about Buaji's financial condition. This girl is getting a job, something she's never had before, to help a woman who disparages every move she makes. And I know there are many reasons. Her Paelia's marriage was broken off. A problem she attributes to Khushi. Pael is her brother's daughter. Khushi is an adopted. There are a lot of external factors that some might find important, but my problem with her is the same reason my problem is with Nani during the first episodes. The degree of cruelty that we justify as, or rather, the show tried to justify as palatable. And I think that is something I needed to bring up. It is not a huge part of the track that we're talking about right now, but it's something that needs to be acknowledged, that it is deeply problematic, just as problematic as Arnav dropping her in a box on top of boxes to prove an egotistical point. Wow, I can't speak.
No, definitely. I think the only reason I'm a little more okay with the Buaji thing is because you do see her coming around to, like, once she realizes she fucked up with Sham, I think Buaji and Khushi's relationship shifts starkly, and it becomes one of like a almost like godmother role. So I like that there's growth there. Not that Arnav's character doesn't have growth, but it's just this is a moment that didn't get addressed very well. All right, so that covers what we didn't like. Now we are going to go into what we did like. And I actually would like to start off by saying this because this leads me to the last point, almost. The last point that I was talking about ties back into what I really liked, is that like Khushi saying, I'd rather fall than be caught by you, I think shifts something in the relationship between Arnav and Khushi significantly, because you can see that he starts contradicting himself from that point. There's a different vibe to the, for lack of a better word, to their relationship after that point. You see Khushi as he sees Khushi as a stronger character, someone who's like a worthy opponent almost. There's that whole, maybe I'm going too far in, but when she goes back up and starts talking to him about, like, I'm not walking out of here as if I did something wrong, because I didn't. I think he's surprised that she would do it, which kind of contradicts his belief that she's a con artist. He says a lot of things in that conversation that I was like, you do realize that you're being slightly bipolar right now. She's like, I was here to work, and he was like, jo tum kar nahi sakti. And it's like, you believe she's a con artist who crashed your fashion show, cornered you in your office, managed to get a job at AR, but you think she cannot do, I don't know, what, Lavanya's assistant's role? Like, you don't think she's capable of that? And he never saw her CV. What if she had a major in, I don't know, communications or something? He does not know that. He's starting to, like, his illusion of being the know-it-all is starting to crack, and I really enjoy that.
Absolutely. I love Arnav in contemplation. I love it. And I think he kind of referred to Khushi not being able to do an honest job, as opposed to Khushi not being able to do any job. Yeah, no, Arnav contradicts himself so much. I love this office track because of it, because it's a really good track that shows that he has one perception and it's shattered. And he has another perception and it's shattered. And he's halfway between impressed and confused. I'm just like, at the end of the office track, I'm like, Arnav, how come you're not hiring her? This girl without any strong education could easily maneuver daily tasks that have been locked up due to bureaucracy or some office politics shit. How come you're not hiring her? But anyways, before I go deeper into what I liked, I would, as you know, Mary Adat, I would go back to the technical side of things that I absolutely adored about this track. First thing first, I really like the AR office, okay? It's very open, very transparent, open concept. I like it that there are these half cubicles. I like Arnav's office because it establishes power dynamic. He's right on top. He's the only one on top, but it's also all glass. So everyone can see what's going on in his cabin all the time. And I cannot be more appreciative of that. I like the idea of knowing that you have a boss, but also knowing that you also can see what's going right through his office all the time. It kind of eliminates a degree of corruption for me, just to be able to see my boss all day, right on top, on what he's doing and what he's not doing. So great set design, I would say. And I mean, the office is very reflective of Arnav's personality, very powerful, but also very transparent. Yes, Arnav is transparent. He's kind of very basic about what he wants and what he thinks. And for anyone who's not transparent, Sham Manohar Jha, guys. Minor production detail. I love that there's red everywhere because there's one thing that always bites me in that a character does not have a certain liking until and unless that liking is made relevant to the heroine. Like, we never get to know that a character likes a certain color until and unless the heroine turns up in that certain color, and suddenly we're like, oh, that's the hero's favorite color. But over here, there's red everywhere. So when we later get to know that Arnav likes red, I'm like, yeah, that was evident that he likes red because his whole office is red. So it just makes it more organic. I don't know if this was intentional or not, but it made it organic and just made the whole Diwali thing enjoyable to watch, because I would have had a lot of cribbing if it was never shown that Arnav liked colors and then suddenly he likes red. That would have been pretty jarring. Wardrobe wise, I really like Khushi's outfits. Still, I like them because she's the only one who's dressed like that. Anyone who has suffered through the traumatizing recent Star TV shows, I think off late they've been again a little better, but in between, God knows what drugs they were taking while making the outfits. It was like everyone would wear the most random outfits, and therefore there's no baseline. But in the office, you can see there's a baseline of outfits. In the Raizada Mansion Gupta household, you can see there's a baseline of outfits, and Khushi's the only one who decides to like stitch her own clothes and be all Gota fairy and everything.
I must call out Kushi's makeup in the contract signing scene. Very subtle, very minimal, but her eyes look stunning. I don't know how they managed it. Yeah, there's something a bit young, very naive, but still like defiant. Like it helps set the tone that this is something that she shouldn't be doing, but she's doing it anyway, even if she's afraid. She says as much in the dialogue as well, but I just really love how her look adds to that scene, adds to who she is and how it's risky what she's doing. I very much enjoy that.
Yeah, coming to makeup, one thing that they had done really well in the beginning of the show that you can especially see it in the office track is they managed to kind of fade her makeup the longer the day goes. So when Khushi first enters the office, her kajal is on point, her everything is on point, and by the end of it, her hair is a bit loose, her kajal is a bit faded, almost giving it a little bit of a smoky look because it's at the end of the day. And I think I really like that. Like, you get a sense that she's tired and the day has passed, but she's also ready to kill people. And I love it. And then again, with wardrobe, I always appreciate that Akash appears in opposite color tones of Arnav. It's lovely to watch him. He's always in light gray or cream suits with like white or baby blue shirts. It's lovely to take note of all of that. I really liked Lavanya's outfit and makeup. I think it really gets better. She definitely looks like the head of a department, and I would put her in PR or marketing just by the way she dresses up. She looks fab. I can see that's the person you send out for a press conference because she carries the face of AR. And again, the set is very intelligently used. The office space, you get to know Lavanya works for a bigger post because she has a cabin to herself. Not a big fan of the wallpaper, but she has like her separate space while the rest of the staff are in little cubicles. So intelligent sets and great editing in the sense that this is where drama begins. Okay, to anyone who wants to understand what difference editing makes, see this scene in the IPK rewind and see the same scene in your own, like, in the episode on Hotstar. You will understand the drama is solely like the tempo of the music is increased, and you just have Barun and Sinai staring at each other in shock, like, oh, Arnav, what the hell are you doing here? Khushi, what the hell are you doing here? Okay, that sounds very familiar, but like, ASR and that Larki, what are they doing here? But when you see it in the rewind, we don't really get to capture their expressions because we'll have these sudden zoom ins and fades that people put in to increase the drama. And that's bad editing. Because I'm like, I somehow understand the shock better of any moment when we get to see their face and the sound accompanies it. The camera work is very simple. Okay, simple. I'm not saying simple in the sense I'm demeaning their effort, but then it's made to be pretty realistically put. So there's no swooping grand gestures happening, but you get to see the actors. And especially in a dramatic scene, I was a bit afraid whenever drama comes in, I'm a bit afraid as to what they would do with editing, but they've actually kept it pretty simple. And I think that really works in delivering the effective performance that the actors delivered. So that's there. And then what else do I have? Minor prop detail I have. That Khushi's dupatta, when it's torn and hanging on the side mirror, kind of looks like Devi Maiya's chunri. That it's hanging on the side mirror. Just saying, like, there's this one thing in filmmaking that nothing is unintentional, but so I'm just like, I noticed that if you guys did that on purpose 9 years later. Just saying. And again, going back to editing, I think what I find very interesting are the memories Arnav and Khushi mutually have towards each other. First of all, I'm in love with the flashbacks in the Office track because it's pitch perfect. There's a tone of tension in all of their flashbacks. None of them are romanticizing any event. We as an audience realize there's something between them. For both of them, it's tension. Although I am very surprised that the first time that both of them see each other under the table, like, she's under the table, they have a very interesting set of memories. Is that they remember each other's eyes first. Because it's a mutual flashback, we can assume that Khushi remembers that there was a person she walked across in the dargah, and Arnav realizes the dupatta that wonderfully flew into his face was Khushi's. And those are some very soft moments. Things like that remind us that there might be something, but hold your horses.
I don't know if that hold your horses was for me, but I'm not holding my horses because I'm about to say that when I saw those flashbacks, I was, we talked a little bit about how up until Arnav drops Khushi, I agree with everything he does and says. Most of the time, I understand why he doesn't say things. When he's having those flashbacks, I'm just in my head thinking he's remembering every moment that shouldn't have happened as a coincidence happening. I don't see it as like, I don't know. I mean, to me, it's just him remembering she crashed my fashion show. She showed up at the dargah, had like, I don't know, whipped her dupatta across my face, walked off, argued with me, showed up in the garage, etc., etc. Like she's firmly establishing herself as a stalker in Arnav's mind. And that's how I view the flashbacks. And from Khushi's perspective, I think it's about like every time he mistreated her up until this point, and she's like, this is becoming a pattern. Probably, I don't know. Maybe other people saw it as like, oh, they remember every moment that it happened in whatever way. But I'm just like stalkers.
No. If there was a rabave going on in the background, I would have been like, excuse me. Trust me, there are some shows which have like a background of pyar tera mera when something weird is happening, and I'm like, what? Yeah, it's terrible. But no, none of that. I think I just found it interesting that those are the most aesthetically pleasing shots. Okay, so I'll just like, that's the most beautiful shot of Arnav's eyes and the most beautiful shot of Khushi's eyes, and that whole. I'm just like, the aesthetic part of me is just dying when that's happening. But as you rightly said, I think Arnav and Khushi themselves are like, excuse me, what the hey Devi Maya. Again, some of the sharpest dialogues are written over here. Dialogues are so important because we get this feeling that Arnav and Khushi are almost playing like a TT match, because it's like back and forth, table tennis, back and forth. And it's only delivered so well because the dialogues are so great. Where Arnav is like, tum ya kya kariyo, etc., etc., etc. And her sass is on another level. I was thinking since morning, what's wrong in this place? The minute I looked at your face, I could understand what it is. Khushi, I love you. I love the sass. It's so good. And Arnav is like, get out. And she's like, ja rahe. And especially that little thing that tumne, who gave you a job? Like, gave me a job? It's my mistake that I took this job. The dialogues are delivered so well, and the dialogues are written so well. It's almost lyrical at the way they go back and forth. So that's some really good dialogue writing. Like right now, I butchered all of them while translating it. And the last thing that I want to, as I said, I really love the flashbacks because as I hate monologues to express intent. So I really love it that they use Khushi's humiliation, the humiliation she feels as flashbacks. She does not resolve, like Sanaya is a brilliant actress. You don't need a monologue to resolve her intention because she somehow successfully manages to convince her through her eyes. So the fact that she'll go and confront Arnav is not like, ab main jaake Arnav Singh Rai to ko dikha dungi. No, she just thinks of every time that she's been humiliated, and she thinks enough is enough, and then in the next scene we can understand what conclusion she's come to. And the very last thing that I love in camera work will include our dearest Akash and Payal, because we have two couples now who stare at each other, Arnav and Khushi on almost every other instant, and Akash and Payal. How do you get to know that Akash and Payal immediately fall in puppy love, while Arnav and Khushi have something electric, but they have a lot of things to fight on? And this is if you strip away the audio. Okay, audio plays a huge thing over there. There's like a hey going on for Akash and Payal, and for Arnav and Khushi it's like some great orchestra. But if you strip away the audio, if you just look at the camera work, you will see the camera for Arnav and Khushi works really well as what the other person is seeing in the other person. So Arnav is aware Khushi is looking at him. Khushi is very aware that Arnav is staring at her. And there are these deliberate movements that when Arnav removes his jacket, if that moment had just been like a medium close-up with no movement of the camera, you'd feel like, oh, Arnav's removing his jacket. What is he doing? But the fact that they show this deliberate, I forgot this technical term, and my professor would kill me. But I think it's a tilt from bottom to up, where you can see that that's how Khushi's looking at him, that she's looking at him unbuttoning his shirt. She's looking at his eyes, which seem to have a very mixed message of sorts. And she's like, what the hell is happening here? And we sense discomfort instead of any sort of romance, only because of how camera works. But for Akash and Payal, the camera is something else. It's swooping in from the sides like a wind and giving these close little close-ups of Akash's eyes and Payal's eyes, and the camera gently plays like water of first focusing of Akash in the foreground and then gently focusing to Payal in the background, and then there's a reverse of, just these things. It plays so beautifully that you realize that love is happening instantly for them.
I have a question. Do you think it was love at first sight for Akash and Payal?
I think it was love at first sight, maybe for Akash. I don't think Payal's ready to think about someone in that way yet. She sees as much when she has the conversation with Khushi. I don't think there's much. She's like, I see this as like she starts talking very because Payal's not someone who up until this moment is someone who speaks a lot with strangers. She says a lot to Akash. Maybe that's the way they convey that there's something there from her side as well. Maybe she feels comfortable enough to rant at him. But I think it's definitely, if anyone does fall in love instantly, it was Akash at that moment, because the music indicates as much. I think it's very much him. Like how we distinguish between Arnav rabbaing with Khushi for a while before Khushi ever even realizes that she feels something. It's a similar dynamic with Akash and Payal for me. I think the song is playing in his head, not hers.
I think Payal notices Akash. She notices him quite well. But as you said, she's not like, I find this interesting dynamic between Akash and Payal, because Payal is someone who was supposed to get married. So she was someone who probably, like, she was heartbroken when the marriage broke, not just because of the badnami, what happened, but her, she loses trust in people. Like, so we can assume that she trusted Abhishek. So we can assume there was some fond feeling or affection. So I don't know how to say it, but I feel Payal kind of realizes what the attraction means, and she's like, nope, I'm not going to deal with this, which you, which comes up pretty much later, because this is going very deep into the show. But pretty much later, Payal is never not unaware of what she feels for Akash. She does not question that whether or not she's in love with him. Like, she never stops Akash from proposing to her because, no, Akash, I don't love you. She's like, no, there are some practical shit that needs to be sorted out. And I think that's a very good contrast to Khushi not knowing what she feels for Arnav. I think Payal knows somewhere down the line what she feels for Akash, but she's very practical and realist and knows that there are many other things to be dealt with. As opposed to Akash is like, मैंने देखा मुझे प्यार हो गया.
The only reason I not maybe disagree is a strong word. The only reason I feel differently about Payal viewing Akash in any sort of way is because she has that conversation with Buaji a bit later where she talks about Abhishek as someone I think, arranged marriage or not, given that she was engaged to a guy, she envisioned herself being married to him. I think she's still very much, it wasn't love, but you get comfortable with the idea of being someone's wife, and you sort of see these dreams of how life would be once you're married to them. I think she's still in that. So I don't know if she, the only reason I said it's shown in a different way is because there's a moment where Payal like realizes that she's essentially yelling at a stranger, or not yelling, but she's just speaking very factually, and there's a familiarity in that conversation she realizes, and she's like, oh, I'm sorry, and she's about to leave, and Akash is like, no. I find that moment very funny. But yeah, that's probably the only reason I was like, maybe not from her perspective yet.
I feel with Pyle, I think she had like an actual panic attack. You know how in panic attacks, certain you just rant with random strangers? That's what happened. Poor girl, had a panic attack, led to the poor boy falling in love with her. Because my favorite moment is when she's leaving, she's like, I've got to go. She leaves. She doesn't even notice who he is. He's like, my name is Akash. I'm like, oh, there, puppy, there. My name is Akash. Like, yeah, she's long gone, buddy, but you tried. We appreciate it. Thank you for the laughs.
I'll wrap it up with one last thing on technical thing. I really enjoy the difference, similar to like the costuming and like, everything. The music that they use for Akash and Payal is very sweet, very, like as was saying, puppy love, like, love at first sight, magical. There's this sort of, I don't know how to describe it. There's this like sparkly tone to the music. Whereas with Arnav and Khushi, the first time Rabaway happens, it's very much like the sensual, something deep, something sexy. Like, it's a different, it makes you feel something different. When I watched Akash and Payal and that music came on, I was like, oh, how cute. Like, aw, like that was my instant reaction when Rabbawe happened. I was like, oh shit. So I really enjoy how they use music intentionally, and it matches the story that they're showing on screen. All right. I think that about covers the technical aspects of what we liked. I'll I'll give S a chance to talk about the non-technical aspects of what she liked before I jump in with my own.
So remember how I said I cringed at the terrible foreshadowing of Manju auntie and that whole office ka thingy? Consider our office, yes, sasural. I think they beautifully show foreshadowing through the first Tu Hi Bata Mere Maula sequence. It is gorgeous. I can't tell you. I have Rabbaways for the Tu Hi Bata Mere Maula, just saying. First of all, I'm a sucker for Sufi, so brownie points wahan pe, but I think the beauty of foreshadowing is that you don't realize what it means until and unless the event has happened. And then you can look back and be like, makes a lot of sense. So just the fact that the four of them are sitting lost in deep thought, but they're so interconnected with each other. There are these little, I'm going back to technicals again. Very often Arnav fades into Khushi, Khushi fades into Arnav. Khushi has a sharp cut with Akash. Akash fades into Payal, like they use a cross dissolve. So Akash fades into Payal, Payal fades into Akash, and then there's a sharp cut when one couple is going to the other couple. And in the end, they're all fading into each other. And I think that's such a beautiful way of showing that how all of their lives matter to the other people and how important it will be for the story ahead. Because otherwise, you're just like, oh, are they highlighting the contrast that Akash, Payal, Arnav, Khushi's, their love stories will have? But then if you go later into the show, you realize that Akash and Payal's love story matters a lot to Arnav and Khushi's love story. It forms the crux of the show. And this is a very clever, subtle way of showing how interdependent all of their lives will become, intertwined their lives would become. It is very aesthetically shot, and I think it gives us little characteristics that Payal, although jaded and hurt, there's a bit of hope in her for some reason. She looks a bit hopeful. Khushi, the beautiful part I think in all of this is that Khushi knows her dreams about marriage is a bit silly, and she loves to indulge in that fantasy. Like, she's happy and she's chirpy and she's also aware of it. Like which I think is a nice way to play out a character. And Arnav looks very thoughtful, which is such a stark contrast to all his oka, the whatever we're hearing from him so far. To find him be so contemplative after his sister has just told him that when you fall in love, you won't understand, or that Arnav, I don't think you're ready to. I think you're uncomfortable with the topic of marrying Lavanya for other reasons. So I think all of this, the Tu Hi Bata Mere Maula sequence, speaks volumes.
And can I just shout out whoever made the call not to have Arnav have a flashback to Khushi when Anjali says, when that person walks into your life, you will, this will happen. And I'm like, they're not there yet. Please do not show me a flashback of him thinking about Khushi, because that's not the relationship that they have yet. I appreciate that restraint so damn much. I really like the slow burn way that their story builds. Like, they're not thinking about each other. Like, it's very subtle the way they do it. They creep into each other's thoughts despite their best efforts. It's not that they start thinking about each other when it comes to love or a relationship. It just happens after a while, and they're concerned and angry and frustrated that it's happening. And I really appreciate that they didn't do it at this point, because their relationship isn't there yet.
I really like the fact that they show Arnav and Lavanya's relationship is problematic without even Khushi being in the picture. Because Lavanya choosing to eat something that gives her an allergy only because she knows Arnav likes that cake. I mean, she's made sure that the cake is sugar-free, right? Because she doesn't want him to die. And he is not aware of the fact that she has eaten something that's giving her allergies. And you can clearly understand who's more invested in this relationship. Khushi's existence only gave an earlier end to this relationship. I wanted Arnav and Lavanya to be separate only for both of their well-beings, because they both had very different expectations from the relationship, and you can understand that from the get-go.
Yeah, I think it's also it's highlighted. Lavanya's like, I have a full list of things that you like and dislike. I would never do something that would irritate you. When Arnav's questioning her about the flowers being sent to his house, and in the literal next second, he dismisses she's like, you're aware of this, right? And his focus is completely on Devi Maya statue. Like, he's not even listening to her saying that she has a portfolio of his likes and dislikes. And I'm like, this is a very imbalanced relationship. Not because of the professional side of things. It's just as a relationship, they're not on the same page. And again, I'm harping on this fact, but I like that when Anjali questions Arnav about it, she's like, do you disagree with the concept of marriage, or do you not want to get married to Lavanya? And it's not, there's no bullshit going on around oh, is there anyone else, etc., etc. That's not why it is. It's just that is Lavanya right for you? Is that the reason that you're hesitant about it? And that makes Arnav's thoughtful look later on make sense. It's because he might be contemplating what Anjali said, even though he brushed it off when she said it in front of him. So I really like the way things are being set up for the payoff. And these are a few things that do pay off. So I'm very happy about these. Can I go into Akash and Payal now? All right, I have a lot to say. Akash's character is, I know at a certain point he turns into like the bumbling, I wouldn't call him fool, but you know that character around Payal, and I think it's only around Payal because you can see that he's actually a really smooth talker in these initial episodes, like when he's going off for his trip and Anjali, I don't know, is doing his arti or something, and Mami, like he's talking about like leaving, and he's like, even if I'm gone, my heart will be here. How can I, how will I be happy, or something to that effect? I'm like, you smooth talking, whatever. I almost swore at him. He didn't deserve it, but and then he has these like, when he's talking to Mami, he makes these quips about like Barbadi.com, which I burst out laughing. Like his character is very much the perfect contrast to Arnav in that he's someone who, I think he's very smart. He's more charming. I think he is what NK's character eventually ended up being as well. Like in that, like there are probably more similarities between them. They know how to use their lightheartedness to like settle a situation, or you kind of see it when he helps Anjali settle that drama between Nani and Mami as well. Like he's very much Anjali's like partner in crime. Their relationship is different than what it is with Anjali and Arnav, and you see that Akash's character is why like that sort of difference exists. I just very much enjoy Akash as this like he can fade into a background easily enough, but he can also like jump in and help out with the situation when need be. And he does step in when Arnav's not there. Whenever needed, you do see that happening quite frequently. It's a very good foundation for that character. I'm just sad that it didn't like the character arc went nowhere. I love all of Anjali and Akash's interactions. There, there's a bit when she's questioning him about the dupatta, and she's like, "Bana rahe ho, hame." I love it every time, and him trying to be like, "Oh, I'm turning red because I'm going from home to office and office to home," and and Anjali said, "Uh huh, uh huh, yeah. Do I look like I have flowers in my ear?" I love their interactions. That is comedy that I appreciate. That's comedy done well. So that's very much like I don't know. I really love like the secondary characters, the secondary pairing in the show. They got so right in the beginning. I'm just sad that it didn't live up to what it could have. So that's my Akash thing. I will pause now before I go into Payal's characteristics.
He's a fellow Chashmish, okay? So he has my heart udhari. I love Akash because he's smart, he's brilliant, he is so logical, but he's also very sweet and gentle to the people he loves. That's a man you want to marry. Akash Singh Raizada, the other sweeter ASR. And you know what's lovely about it is that Akash refuses to be considered as his brother's counterpart. And I think that can happen, you can understand that when his mom is like, "Arey, why do you work so hard?" And Akash just looks at his mom and he's like, this question should be answered once you take a look at Bhai. You know, the amount of love that he has for Arnav has never been better said than in that one sentence, because Akash later says Bhai is everything, but that does not kind of matter as much as Akash immediately being like, "Don't tell me I work hard when my brother is working his ass off to build this company." And you know, it's a slight way of defense, but it's also like, but also Akash hates to be put on anyone's, like, he hates to be put on a pedestal. And I think these are the few elements that makes me fall in love with Akash, because he's a practical. If Anjali understands Arnav's heart, Akash is the one who understands Arnav's brain very well. In the previous episode, when Arnav slaps Mool Rajani and gives him 2.5 crores, he just goes up to his brother and he's like, what was the need in doing that? We had a team of lawyers to deal with him. And I'm like, Akash, You're using brains. He always brings out the most logical, rational explanation of things. So, which is why I really appreciate that when Arnav and Khushi are having all of this tutu meme in the office, Akash is not present. He's not present when this contract drama happens. He's not present when Khushi falls off a floor. And he is not present when Arnav assigns her to measure male models. And I think that might seem like, oh, the actor was not available for the dates. I'm like, no. Given the character Akash was at that point, I think if Akash was present in the office when all of this was happening, Akash would have been like, Bhai, what are you doing? And for the little bit, this goes later into the show, but for the little bit that Akash is present in the office with Khushi, he's always siding with Khushi until and unless things go off charts. Like, Akash is made unaware of a lot of things that his brother does. And I think that works a lot in favor of the fact that Akash has a certain image of his brother and he defends his brother on several occasions. And I think if Akash had witnessed certain things, then that image would have cracked. And therefore, later in the show, Arnav might have not had the entire leverage on the situation of marriage that Akash follows me blindly, that he would have if Akash also treated his brother in a very logical, rational way as opposed to his unending devotion towards Bhai. I think I found it very smart that Akash is not present in certain situations. I think that's all that I have for Akash. I love him, in short. Anything else you have to add about Akash?
Yeah, I'm just gonna say that the sidelining might also have been because Akash, much like Pyle, who I'll get into in a minute, is very logical, like as mentioned. So even beyond the fact that he has a certain image of Arnav, I think he would have definitely seen the flaw in how, like, all the things that if Kushi were a little more aware of the options available to her, could have gone wrong for AR. Because I told you about this headcanon already. I think he's either in finance or is a lawyer. And he's very much that person who would have told Arnav that, I mean, your little game of like cat and mouse aside, you could be opening AR up to like massive liability suits. So you need to be careful about how you treat your employees. I think that, like, Akash being not present, the one character who had the means to talk to Arnav in a convincing tone, who could dare talk to him, I think, not being present during these interactions was well done, because otherwise you're left questioning either Akash's character or, you know, there could have been like potential for that track to not go as smoothly.
Mm-hmm. I like the fact that the contract falls very naturally, because contracts have become a rage in current Indian television right now. And it's very pleasing to see that in this show, the contract, yeah, you suddenly becomes either someone's PA or someone's wife achanak. I've seen so many shows where this is happening.
I just have so many questions about contracts. You'll have to catch me up on them. Having said that, I agree with R when she says there's so many liability suits. I could basically, the one episode I could think of 7, and that's just off the top of my head. But yeah, I want to add my feelings towards Akash because I don't think I confess my love for him as much as I should. One of the greatest things I've seen about Akash is his ability to depress a situation that is on the brink of exploding, whether it's with his grandmother and his mother, in-laws, whatever that is. And his ability to unabashedly fall in love. It's not that great a thing when we think about it, but in the midst of all those Arnav's broody darkness, Kushi's absolute lack of clarity, mental clarity, like Kushi's mental fog when it comes to love, we have this one character who knows, hey, hi, I want you, I got you, gotta find you, wanna marry you, gonna wipe you up. He knew it. He's like, yes, Akash, and he's thinking that gonna wipe you up. So shout out for men who can do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that. And I think R was going to discuss about Payal.
Yes.
Something you like about her?
Akash's counterpart in every way. I think they're very, like, they're other than him just seeing her and falling in love. I do appreciate that their characters are also set up to be similar to how they're showing Arnav and Khushi. Payal's very logical as well. Like you see that when she's questioning Khushi, like Khushi's like, I'm going to do this job. I'm going to do my job, earn money and pay it off. And Payal's like, it's first of all, it's his job. Like he's giving you the job. You're going to earn money working for the same person who you're supposed to pay off after everything that already happened. How do you see this going exactly? And I appreciate that voice of reason being in Khushi's life. I think it's severely lacking once they get married. And you can see that, you know, Akash and Payal sort of like have that similarity in that they're both very logical. They think through things in a very realistic, grounded way. Payal talks up Khushi to Buaji because she can see that Buaji doesn't exactly feel super warm about Khushi. So Payal's like, oh, she can do the job. Like she used to be the person who would go pay off our bills, or like she dealt with the, you know, Babuji's like finances and everything. And she's defending Khushi to Buaji, and you can see that what S was mentioning, like when Mami was questioning Arnav or like why he's working so hard, Akash comes to Arnav's defense. Similarly, Payal comes to Khushi's defense when it's needed. That's very well set up as well, and I just really appreciate Payal. Payal knows how to deal with people. Payal and Akash know how to deal with people very well. Payal, she sees that Khushi came back from work morose. She doesn't like fall all over her and is like, what happened? Why are you like this? Like, what's up with you, etc., etc. She quietly goes, makes some food, comes back, and she's like, Kalo, like I can see that you're hungry. And if you're done eating, and maybe you can also share a little bit about what happened with me. It's a very like, she does it so well. She can see that that's what Khushi needs then. It's not like, you know, demand for what happened, or like yelling and screaming would get her nowhere. She's just like, when you want to share, I'm here to listen. And that's a very lovely sisterly bond that they have. Those characters were so good. One of my biggest regrets of IPK is that they kind of like faded into the background after they got married.
Yeah, and they were very instrumental, very important. And just one thing, like, you know, B had earlier mentioned about how it was troubling the stark difference through which Buaji treats Payal and Khushi. One thing I really liked is this is the beginning of Buaji's growth as a character. So this is where she starts softening up to Khushi. And you realize that a woman as traditional as Buaji should have been satisfied with Khushi's all dreams for marriage and this and that. But rather, Buaji softens up and actually starts to appreciate Khushi when Payal lists out how independent Khushi is, how she helps Shashi run the sweet shop, and how she helps in getting the electricity bills and all of it done. You see Buaji, a woman who's lived as a widow, softening up to a woman who knows how to work around the world. Because up until then, you see that she has an image of Khushi being a bumbling idiot who knows nothing about the world. You can see Buaji appreciating how well Khushi is adapting to change and how she makes every city her own, and how the city has become her own. And I think I really appreciate that Buaji is someone who, until the weird sham track, is so on board with Khushi's plans of making money and opening sweet shops and just these little things. Because I think we get very few female characters who are very happy when when a younger, almost childlike character is going for employment.
Agreed. Although she does take a large step back when it comes to Sham. We'll talk about it when we get there, but I will shift the focus to something I loved about Arnav's character in this sequence. First things first, I'll say a couple of things. I love him getting self-owned when he's like, which idiot gave you a job? And then like fast forward, turns out he's the idiot. Or he realizes that Khushi's the one who set off the fire alarm, and he's looking at the video footage and he's like, I will fire you for this offense, except he realizes that he has a contract with Khushi and if he were to fire her, he needs to change his name. I just really appreciate Arnav stepping in his own traps so much. It's so satisfactory. So those are a few moments that's like, again, comedy done really, really well.
One of my biggest questions, I know this is complete, well, it is related. I kept on remembering his face when he found out, he's hoping that she is going to get herself fired. She was his secretary who could not type anything properly. Obviously, how could she? He was speaking a mile a minute because he's Arnav Singh Raisada. I have other not pronouns, I have other adjectives to describe him, but I don't think either of you would prefer that at this point of time for your wonderful podcast. So he gives her a whole lot of things to type up, and he expects that she's going to do that. Then he expects her to fail because he doesn't have to change his name then. She comes in and he's like, oh, it's a letter of resignation. My favorite moment of that episode is that look on his face, that sheer disbelief. Like, she did this? What the actual F? She did this, and he's just looking. The broken what the, like the what that he says is so broken. It's my favorite moment of the show. Like, aha, gotcha.
I literally wrote down Arnav's face when she starts saying the measurements. Chef's kisses. So clearly I enjoyed it as well.
You know what I find the most hilarious part of in all of this is that they try to set up Arnav as a villain when he's really not. Actually, because one thing I really liked is how the writers subtly showed that Arnav's worldview on people and on women trying to take advantage of his power and position is not false nor jaded. And we get this through this tiny scene where this assistant, Sonia, is going to go to his cabin for work. And she's being instructed to go to Lavanya because she's hired as Lavanya's assistant. But rather, she decides to straight go to ASR and decides to tuck her hair behind her ear and go directly to the boss's place. She does not announce that she is not the person who he thinks she is. Sorts out work. Basically, she's like upstaging Lavanya the minute she enters. And, like it was very subtly shown, but Sonia's intent was very clear. And I liked that happened because, okay, plot-wise, Lavanya is like, okay, I basically take someone that Arnav would never look at. But one of the reasons why I like that minute scene is because it kind of justifies or gives a reason. You have to only imagine how many women might have come up to him like that. And I think most of us might see that scene as, oh, that's what led Khushi to being hired on the spot. But I also see that as a scene for, yeah, you know what? Arnav's brash behavior is a little bit justified, and that he thinks that the world is out to take advantage of him. Because the other two people that you've seen, like Sim and Pam, are idiots. Lavanya truly knows her job, I think. Moor Rajani out there claiming bullshit, and then the Sonia tucks her hair and decides to be all nice and pretty before she can meet the boss himself. And I'm like, he is not really surrounded with the best people.
Yeah, it gives him legitimate standing for what he's saying to Khushi, but also it's also an indicator because he doesn't say anything to Sonia. He's just like, thanks, and he leaves with the file. With Khushi, you see that it is different. He has a justification for why he suspects, but also the way he deals with Khushi is different than how he would deal with other people who bother him.
Oh my god, I love it that Arnav does not even give Sonia a second glance. He has no idea. He's just like, Tum kaun ho? Who the hell are you? He's like, okay, you got it done. And he's like literally Sonia could be an amoeba and it would make no difference for Arnav Singh Raisala. Those just little things just give me a little bit of more respect to Arnav. Like, had he just even taken one look at Sonia, I would have been like, nope, Chape, I'm not looking at you. Like, someone's giving you the Chape signals and you're responding with Chape signals. I am not into this Chape. But Arnav is just like, who the hell are you? You're on Lavanya. Where's Lavanya? Oh, your assistant got this job done? Lavanya, what are you doing? Assistant? Cool, thanks. And he gets off. And I'm like, yay!
Adding on to this Arnav Singh Raisala appreciation, apparently, I'll give him the benefit of doubt here in that he tries at every given point of time up until the fall, or him letting Khushi drop. Up until that moment, he tries to cut things off when they happen. Like at the dargah, he's like fake though. He leaves when Khushi is when they meet in the garage and they're having that argument. She's like, humming up, like she says something along the lines of like, I don't care what you have to say, or like I don't want to listen to what you are saying. And he's like, Tamatsuno, get lost. And he's about to leave, and her dupatta stuck in the car, on the car mirror or whatever. And it's like you can see that he's trying to, like, it's not like he. How do I don't know how to say it, but it's not like he's invested in this yet. He becomes invested when the offer, like when the contract conversation happens, and she openly defies him, and she's like, she's challenging him at that point, and he's like, okay, I'll play. But up until that point, he has a point. Like she just shows up randomly, lectures him. She also has a habit of like just talking a little bit too much, like saying when she's S said she loved this dialogue, and I was just looking at it from Arnav's perspective, where Khushi's like, I was thinking all day that something's wrong in this office. Now I understood what's wrong. I'm just like, Khushi, you're digging your own grave here. Like you could have left. Like I fully believe if Khushi didn't say things just to say things at certain points. I'm not excusing Arnav, but even at the dargah, she lectures on things she shouldn't. He gets irritated, not justifying what Arnav does, but I can see why he gets as irritated as he does. It's not like he's initiating these fights. I give Arnav's character the benefit of doubt there, but he starts becoming someone I want to stab very, very soon. So I like that they set him up not as someone who has like these evil motives.
I can't believe I lived to see the day where Rids is defending Arnav Singh Raizada. That's all I needed to add to this.
My influence.
I see.
No. I always give him the benefit of doubt when he was reasonable. When he does stupid shit, he has an open invitation to walk into my fist. In the beginning episodes, I can see every reason why he thinks Khushi's stalking him, because she looks like a stalker. Like in the parking lot, she literally is behind a wall. The minute he walks to his car, she runs out from behind the wall, and she's like, hey, I'm here. Why are you doing this? Blah, 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 blah. And he's like, what the fuck? So I'm being very fair, I think.
And now we have to talk about our first love, which is Khushi. I absolutely loved her. And at this point, I'm sure Arnav clearly understood there's been some sort of misunderstanding. And he's realized that Khushi is clearly not who he thinks she is. Otherwise, why would he send her to measure male models and think she will be unable to do it? Because that should not fluster her. But she's able to do it. And I think at this point, we clearly see a shift of their previous judgments to a battle of ego and self-respect. And I really love it how Khushi uses her presence of mind to battle with situations. And I also love it how Arnav realizes she's intelligent, so I will frustrate her in leaving the job as opposed to giving her actual tasks that she can complete. Because this steps in the next episode, so I'll talk about this later in the next episode. But what I really like is that in the beginning, Khushi has a lot of job. Like Lavanya piles work on her, and she's done with all of it. On top of that, Arnav gives her the ridiculous job of measuring male models. She cleverly does it. And I love it that Khushi uses her brain, and she often gets like, I love it that Khushi's very human. Like she has this spurts of adrenaline adventure, and then she's like, oh my god, I'm screwed. What do I do now? And then you have Manjuri, who gives a much better analogy of how life needs to be distributed between a bitter vegetable and sweets and rice. Like food. Life is like food. I very much agree with that thinking. So I really love Khushi's presence of mind. We see this intelligence that had stemmed from her quickly being able to understand that the shopkeeper was swindling her dad 10 times the amount of what it is, to understanding that, hey, I can solve any and every issue. I have recorded and she's also so honest I love it. And I was like, how did you do it? Khushi could have easily said, isse aapko kya jata hai? How does it matter to you? But Khushi's like, I did it from my phone. There is a recording thing. She explains a grand scheme of things. And I'm like, Khushi, I love you. You know, there's a thing about people being enthusiastic and taking things to their stride. And Khushi's the perfect example of that. She's in an environment, we can learn a lot from her, how she takes it. She's in an environment she's completely alien to, and she takes it in her stride.
Yeah, no, I appreciate a lot about Kushi in these episodes. One, she's a very creative thinker. You can see that. Like she might not have the necessary education, foundation, whatever you might call it, but when you give her a task, she gets it done. No complaints, she will do it. It always frustrated me that we can't, like, once she leaves the office, you never truly see her professional side taken seriously again. Like, yeah, there's the dabba service and all of that, but it's done to irritate Arnav. Like the crux of it lies in something else. I always wanted Khushi to have like a career, because you can see that she enjoys doing things, and she is someone who's like very capable of getting stuff done. Like she would have been an asset to AR. I mean, if Arnav didn't give her stupid jobs, she is someone who, taken seriously, could have done a lot. And I'm sad that we never quite revisit that capacity in her. I also just, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but it's nice to see that they show someone who doesn't have a traditional educational background succeeding in a corporate environment, because I think that's like the role I work in. I get a lot of questions all the time about, like, oh, do you need this specific background in undergrad, or do you need to have, like, do you need this specific skill set to do it? My answer is always like, no, as long as you can figure out the skills that are required for this job, your background shouldn't matter. And it doesn't. You have to prove yourself in an interview, but the degree you have doesn't make or break your opportunity to get it. It might make getting the interview a bit easier, but once you have an interview, everyone's on the same page. I really appreciate that they showed that with Khushi, even if the track was like brief. They showed her succeeding in a corporate environment, which I appreciate. One more thing. There's this tone she has. She talks a lot when she's chirpy or when she's like normal. But the minute she gets sad/angry, there's a very specific combination of that needs to exist. She speaks facts. This happens when the contract conversation is happening. This happens during the resignation scene. It's sort of pared down later on in the show, but I really like how factual and logical she is when she's arguing about something that made her angry/sad. And that whole contract scene is very indicative of that characteristic in her, which I just really love that conversation and how Khushi is in that scene.
Yeah. So essentially, we all love Khushi. That's the matter of fact. B, do you want to add to anything to Khushi before I jump on another thing?
No, I think you said all you can say about it, because that's all I had to say as well. She's incredible. And as R said, Kushi is good at proving that you don't need academic education to be a problem solver, which I found was very empowering. Especially, it was a very empowering commentary, especially in a storyline such as this. I wish they stuck to it.
And now we'll come to a character that everyone has forgotten, but is my sole favorite, the ultimate shipper of Arnav and Khushi. Snake Manure Ja, guys. How can you forget Daryaho? How can you forget? I'm tempted to sing his title song whenever I take his name. But Rids, on the other hand, is like, before airplanes take a run off, there's this guy on the airport signaling people where to go. Rids is literally showing me hands and saying, don't sing it, so I won't. But Sham, I love this Sham because there's something wrong about this guy and I can't figure out for my life what it is. Like, I don't know what is with him. He is being the complete antithesis of Arnav. He's respectful, he's kind, he's sweet. He wiggles his way into situation. He somehow is there everywhere Khushi is. He is there at the temple where she leaves just before first day of office. He calls her up without her ever having given her phone number to him. Guys, that's a red flag. And then he says that, no, I found it because it's in your biodata. And it's, it's the red flags that Sham gives are the things that you would not consider because he's ultimately polite. But then literally that moment sticks out, like pops out in front of my eyes only because I know this is an evil guy. Others, I'm just like, there's something uncomfortable about him, but I don't know what it is. And then he comes in the evening and he's set as Buaji's new PG. Guys, I loved this Sham. You don't know him and therefore you're terrified.
Yep. I don't know if I like it or not, but I will call this out in that Khushi almost comes to the right conclusions about him a lot of times, where she's like, how did you get my number? And he's like, oh, I got it from your biodata. And she's calmed down. When he shows up at Buaji's house, she's like, first Lucknow, then Delhi, then Buaji's house. Are you sure you're not following me? And I think Sham internally probably had like, oh shit moment. But she's like, I'm just kidding. PSA, trust your gut instinct about people. I think because she was uncomfortable around Sham, but she brushed it off because he had that nice guy persona on. As my favorite murder podcast says, pepper spray first, apologize later. Arnav is always suspicious. Khushi is never suspicious or doesn't allow herself to be. She just says her entire life story to Sham every time she talks to him. Like when he calls her at the office, she's like, how did you get my number? And he's like, your CV. And then she jumps from being suspicious to being like, this is my whole family problems, the list of it. And here's every which means you could use to get in with my family. She talks about like Buaji's pension and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Khushi, you're giving it, like, why are you giving a stranger, essentially a stranger, all your information? That whole thing, I'm like, I don't know if I like it. I'm just like, I hope people can see why you should be private about certain things.
That is one thing that is very well done, because I'm not upset on Khushi for doing that. Because if we are supposed to consider her to be 20 years old, I could say that's a mistake that many people could do. Not with someone who has constant trust issues. That's like Arnav. Arnav would never share his life story, not even to his own wife. So that's alag. But someone who generally likes to talk to people, once upon a little bit of prodding from a clever manipulator, they will end up saying all the information to a stranger. And I think the reason why I found Sham so clever is the way he extracted information without even asking. So as to Khushi would always feel like I gave him the information, as opposed to Sham is actually manipulating her in doing so. And I think this is the Sham I really loved, because you don't get to know his connection with the Raizadas, but except any time Khushi's office or job or any of the Raizadas are mentioned, he just stiffens for half a second. Great acting. And I think this is a classic. The amount of satisfaction I had from seeing a villain like this, amazing. And then he started monologuing, but amazing.
The one thing I will say is that Sham, talking about like the manipulative aspect of it, when he tells Khushi that he's going to be a PG, he starts off by saying, I have a surprise for you. I don't know if it'll be a good or a bad surprise. Now, if Khushi says, like, if Khushi reacts with discomfort, she will feel like the asshole because he was instrumental in getting her a job. And I like there were like subtle character traits in Sham that later on you understand, like when you're rewatching the show, you can see how manipulative he was being, but very clever and very subtle.
There are two things I need to add here. Sham is my favorite villain of all time, and he will remain my favorite villain of all time. I cannot think of a better villain when he started off. And I also want to point out that I don't know if anyone missed, but R has a favorite murder podcast. I just want to highlight that fact that this exists. I have known her nearly a decade, but I thought this is an aspect that needs to be highlighted to all the listener here.
I casually dropped that in the conversation. It's called My Favorite Murder. I would not recommend it for you if you're scared of gory topics / dark comedy, but it exists, and they give some solid life advice, like pepper spray first, don't apologize later, stay sexy, don't get murdered. There's many more where that came from.
We hear that quite often, so that's fine. For Sham, going back to Sham, one of the most brilliant things that they did with Sham was they created an antithesis of Arnav. I love Sham because it's really easy to come across a brash, crude, rich, I don't know, villain. It's very hard to come across a charming, but not oilily so, smooth, well-spoken, classy villain that Sham Manohar Jha was portrayed to be. He was the utmost middle-class, educated, self-made man that anyone could respect easily. So when you first meet Sham, yes, we are speaking from hindsight right now. Creep, 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 creep. We speak from hindsight. We speak from watching him unravel. But when we first meet Sham, think of him as where Khushi's standing, like or any other where Buaji's standing. From Buaji's perspective, I would definitely want my daughter to be married to a man like that if I was in that position, because he seems very normal. He seems very approachable, as opposed to Arnav, who's slamming cash stacks on desks every other day because he feels like it. Like the fact that Buaji was okay with him marrying her is amazing. I would have just run him over, but that's neither here or there.
Buaji didn't have a car. That might have saved Arnav. I will also say, this is also, I don't know if this was intentional again, but I really, really love the fact that they made, quote unquote, the nice guy the villain. There's this concept of like, nice guys finish last, or friend zone being a thing. I hate the term friend zone with like deep passion. So I really love the fact that like Sham is portrayed as a nice guy, but Khushi's uncomfortable with him, and that discomfort is justified because he turns out to be a fucking creep. You don't owe nice people anything. If you have an instinct that says there's something iffy about a person, be selfish, be an asshole. As says this should be on a t-shirt. I said it a while ago, but I was like, it's okay to be an asshole sometimes, and Khushi should have been one.
Never met a nice guy, self-proclaimed nice guy who wouldn't, sort of moonlight as a serial killer if they could. So there's that.
Also, one thing that I genuinely loved with Sham's character, that even if you take out the fact that he's a great villain and everything, with Sham's existence, they were able to show the difference of consent from Khushi's side. With Sham's existence, you can realize that she allows Arnav to come at a certain proximity that she does not allow Sham with. And I think that is very important, and that needs to be even more respected. Like, Sham is not just refused because he's a villain, but Khushi also genuinely never sees him from that light.
I don't completely agree the concept of consent being introduced into this, but there's something I want to say. Despite all this, shout out to Abbas Mehta, wherever you are right now, dude. You are the best villain I've come across. You made this character. 10 years down the line, I still think you're the best villain I've come across in visual fiction. So thank you for that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the reason Sham made an impact that he did is because of Abbas's portrayal of him, especially when they allowed the character to be subtle. Eventually turned into a caricature, but the nuance that he brought to the character when he had to portray that, like, you don't know who he is, was very, very well done. I will end on this. Mama and Mommy's relationship. They have my heart, because that relationship is so funny. So, like, Mama trying to convince Mommy or like cajole her when Nani says something stupid. He's like, why are you bothered, Mano? Like, you know how important you are to me. You know how everyone thinks about you. It's such a sweet relationship. You can see that it was a love marriage because of the dynamic that they have, and Mommy always being like, "Aap to shitapiya kar lo." I'm like, it's just a very, like, I don't know. I really enjoy their dynamic, and Mama somehow, like, he's the most non-dramatic person in the house. He's so chill. Like the worst things could be happening in the house, like Arnav and Khushi eloping, or Akash saying that he's not going to get married to the person that mommy has picked out for him. Whatever the character, he's so even keeled. He's so chill. He's just like, I support this person. He's so zen. I need that in my life. I want that in my life.
We see where Akash gets it from, because none of the other Raizadas has the chill.
Okay, now that we have talked for, I don't know, a million years about what we liked, we are going to move on to the point of focus for this episode, which will be about Arnav's obsession with Khushi. I'll say the word obsession lightly, but we just thought it was funny, I guess, in an interesting way, that this man who is supposedly the CEO of AR, who only allows what was that he said? He was like, Lavanya is one of the few people he allows to waste 10 minutes of his life without prior appointment. Wastes, I don't know what, like a week at least, solely on making Khushi's life miserable.
One of the reasons why I genuinely wanted to keep this the point of focus is that's not normal boss behavior. Just saying. I'm always a little bit troubled when people romanticize their office actions, because Arnav's every single action is unhealthy. To be honest, I don't have a huge problem with him accidentally sending her on a site because he did not know that the site contained, that the site had issues. And okay, the way he insults her before that, definitely. But I didn't have a big problem with him sending her to a site where he did not know that the situation was not right. Because honestly, the things that he does knowingly to Khushi is something of more trouble. Like, you're sending a woman alone to measure 5 male models. Excuse me, what are you doing? And the rest of his activities. So it's kind of like Arnav's focus towards Khushi is a wee bit unnatural. And I really appreciate the fact that in the show, they keep it to a focus that even when the rub away happens, Khushi's aware that Arnav is looking at her, but she genuinely does not seem to like him or be more aware about her infatuation for him until and unless it's built on a much more stable ground. So I just wanted to talk about this office track. Not romantic, but very funny. I mean, I always crack up on Arnav being owned.
They got away with making Arnav just quote unquote dark enough that he can be redeemed. If at any point during the office track he made, I don't know, like at any point of the time, if there was an intent of, everyone knows the Me Too moment. So if there had been like any overture towards Khushi in that way, I would have wanted to have him flayed. So I know him removing the jacket. That's one point where I was like, oh, that's interesting. But it's shown from Khushi's perspective. She sees it as a threatening, or like she sees it as a gesture that she's like, what? But he's removing his jacket. Maybe I don't know. Maybe that was one point that I can think of. Even the red sari photo shoot or whatever, he sees her, he notices her. Khushi knows that he notices her, but there's nothing that comes out of it. So they're like teetering on the edge, but they never cross it, which is why his character is redeemable.
That's something I wanted to add to, or rather, I have something to add to your point. It's the male gaze. From clips I've seen that S has shown me on various different occasions of different series. One of the aspects that we see where we see a man admiring a woman is not romanticized. It's rather that disgusting male gaze where she's being scanned from the top to the very bottom in a very highly sexualized manner, and you're supposed to think it's attractive. There's passion there, that there is value added to your personality, to your existence, because you're being scanned as a pound of meat, or maybe 20 pounds of meat, whatever, but you're being treated as one. One of the things that fascinated me about Is Pyar Ko Kya Naam Do, and it still does, a decade in, is never at any point, except maybe when we address how Sham looks at her, but that is a very intentional thing. there was never that attribution of male gaze. Neither was it equated to romance. It wasn't equated to attraction. It wasn't equated to passion. There were many occasions that I can think of that they brought in a very veiled reference to sexuality, to passion. And will, if I'm ever welcome back after interrupting you guys so many times, I will address those at some point or the other. But yes, the reason you said Arnav's redeemable is I've never, the whole time, seen that objectification of Khushi as more than just a woman. And to answer your initial question, why I love Ispyar Ke Kya Naam Doon, and I still do after all this time, is because he was able to differentiate. The authors, director, the producer, everyone was able to differentiate between passion and a very icky sense of male gaze that people equate with passion these days in Indian television.
Yes, that perfectly summarizes why I wanted to bring the office track as just like Arnav's obsession, to be lightly put, with Khushi, as a point of focus is because whatever Arnav does to Khushi over here, in comedy or not, is pretty much the edge of what is acceptable. But unfortunately, in shows post, especially post Is Pyar Ko, I've seen that people saw this became a hit, and used this as a starting point of how they treat their significant other. Okay, at that time it's not a significant other, but in a space where they're either employed or even in a relationship. So I think I find that highly problematic to begin with, because it's a very cleverly done track. Whenever it shifts from something serious or to comedy, it's done very organically. Like, we know it's very wrong to send Khushi to measure male models in a room full of guys, and she's the only woman. I have kept on saying this, that I was really scared in my own high school. I studied in a girls' school for the longest time, and I went to like 11th standard, and I entered my class, and all the like the only chair empty was around like a group of guys, and I felt like I'm going to faint because I was freaked out. So I can clearly understand Khushi being freaked out, but they also like balanced that moment with none of the men being a creep in there. They balanced it out with one of the guys being like, "Arey bhaiya, you called me a bhaiya. You know what?" And like the comedy plays off really well. And I think it balances out that Arnav did something that's not really right. And I think this goes for the rest of the show. Like, as Riz rightly pointed, that he removes his jacket, but then he just keeps it back on his chair. And he tells her to take a dictation. And there is no lingering effect of that. So I think this clever interplay and balance. I'm not coming to the red sari photo shoot because all of that is for the next episode. But even from the beginning, you can see that Arnav and Khushi, they're literally on the edge. This is what makes it interesting and dynamic, because they are fighting, they are having their tiffs and everything, but the writers have cleverly handled situations that balances everything that Arnav is making Khushi do really well. So if at any point of time, if any of these situations were even extended by a scene, like if Arnav even gave the jacket that he removed and told Khushi to hold it, I would have been like, no, I am leaving the show. He told her to hold his jacket after he's removed it. But I think, unfortunately, what's happening is that ever since the show has become popular, I've seen it more in trend, that this is the baseline. This is where things start. And then it gets progressively worse. And probably people, I don't know which random show it was, but the guy did send to a girl knowing that there's some trouble in the area. All of that happens. All of that is shitty things is happening. So the reason why I want to bring this entire office track into focus is because there's no romance over here. It's literally a battle of wits, and it's entertaining to watch because of that.
Yeah, I have, if I count right, 3 points. One, it's true. If Kushi was any weaker, this whole thing would have been off balance. the reason this track works is that the eventual payoff when Khushi tells him off when she resigns is done super well. She never remarks on these tasks, but I think Arnav is smart enough to know that when she's talking about him, the fact that he has authority over her also means he has the responsibility to honor that. When she's talking about it, I think all of this can be taken into consideration as well. And I think he's smart enough to know that he fucked up from the beginning because he had power as a boss that he shouldn't have used in this way. The other aspect of it is he says welcome to hell at the right moment. That's a situation and an environment where he can say that and it not be creepy as fuck, because he's essentially like she knows when signing that contract that he won't make it easy for her to last for that duration. So she's expecting it, and him saying it just, it's kind of like the final nail in the coffin. If he had said that when she was in the office alone with him, or at any point later on when they're having an argument where there is something subtly like romantic happening, I wouldn't have been able to digest that in a character. I think this is a point where nothing was happening from a romance perspective. They were very much being set up as opponents, and him saying that makes sense because he's not going to let her win, so he'll make her life hell.
I mean, right now I have kind of stayed away from taking other shows' names because I don't want to offend any of the fans. But at this point, I don't care because I remember the welcome to hell phrase has become so popular. And just recently, I saw it on a show called Ye Hai Chahate. I agree, there's been a lot of character change within the characters at that point. But obviously, in Ye Hai Chahate, Rudraksh and Rudraksh forcibly marries Prisha for yada, yada, yada. Everything is happening. Prisha agrees to the marriage for her child, and she's with her child in her new husband's house. And in the promo, I don't care what happened in the show. In the promo, Rudraksh storms in, grabs Prisha by the hand, drags her to his room, gives the room is set up for Suhagrat, okay, because it's their first night after wedding. Hands her a glass of milk, and he's like, "Ab patni dharm nahi nibhaogi." Then he closes the door of his bedroom to the camera and says, "Welcome to hell, Prisha Rudraksh Khurana." And we get a close-up of the girl crying and this dramatic music, and he shuts the door. And I'm like, no. I don't care. He obviously does not rape her because he is the male hero of an Indian television show. But the thing is that the reason why I appreciate this so much in IPK is because it's set at the right time. It's in public view. There is no physical intimidation going on, nothing of that sort, and they're set up as opponents. This is going to be a chess match.
The allusion to physical marital rape is horrifying. I'm not saying that he would have done it, but I also am raised in the 90s. I remember Ekta Kapoor series from the 90s where marital rape was a very common thing. So that is still fresh in mind. So that is terrifying. And as I said, I agree with you. Welcome to hell. I don't know if it's a very common, as you say, it probably did become a very common phrase since then, but it being applied in a situation that had no physical intimidation, no expression of physical violence, sets off the hate track on the right note.
Yeah, it's very much like a professional battle, and that's why it's okay. Look, outside of this situation, the only person who should be saying welcome to hell is Hades. So unless you are him, please shut up. The other point that I was going to mention is that I just, once again, Khushi's weaponization of Bhaiya is my favorite ongoing trope in the story. I am so sad. At no point she should have called Sham Bhaiya. Like, it would have ended so many things in its tracks. I don't know. Like, the minute he entered, like the minute he was like, I'm a paying guest in this house, Khushi should have been like, Sham Bhaiya ji is living with us. I'm so happy. I have another sibling in the house. And Buaji would never have considered marriage. Sham would have died of a heart attack. And, like, Khushi and Arnav could have figured out whatever their shit was later on. I was wrong when I said Payal and Akash's character not getting the arc that I wanted was my biggest tragedy. It is not. It's Khushi never calling Sham Bhaiya. End scene.
Do you literally say end scene? Oh my god. Yeah, I know. I really love how they show Khushi naive but intelligent at the same time. She never looks stupid. I know that they tried to recreate something of this during the Mrs. India track and it was unwatchable, to put it politely. But over here, you understand because she's like, oh no, I don't know this atmosphere. How do I work it out? Well, I use my brains. I love it that Kushi's picking up on small things. Kushi hears that, oh, he's going to give her dictation. And Kushi's like, oh my god, that guy's going to give me a dictation. I'll take my phone with me just in case. And then she comes back and she's like, somebody must be Dhaga types. Somebody must be Bhaiyaji types. And then I just love it that the guy's like, you called me. Is it Khushi met another Khushi?
Yeah, I'll end this saying that if you watched Rewind, Arnav says that they still visit their house to get during Raksha Bandhan to get Rakhi tied by Khushi, which I think is a very sweet call out. Yeah, so all of this, I think the main point we wanted to highlight is that Arnav being the CEO, managing director, whatever of AR taking this much interest in an employee is not the norm, and they never made it seem normal. It's very much set up as a thing that, like, again, the resignation scene is the payoff to all of this. So it there's a good arc that ends there, and you realize that this was all Arnav being very much an asshole. So it works because it has a payoff that is equally as powerful. Please do not take this as the blueprint to something and then make it romantic. That's not how this works. Now that we have wrapped up with our point of focus, I'm just going to super quickly talk about what you can expect in the next episode. Expect me to not be able to get a word in edgewise next time because it's S's favorite episode of all time. We're going to be talking about the first Rabbawe.
One second. You can't introduce it like that. We're going to be talking about hey, Rabbawe, ho, Rabbawe, ho, Rabbawe. Thank you. Now continue.
Given that I don't expect to speak a lot in the next episode, would you mind if I didn't show up to it? Because I don't know if I can sit through the varying renditions of Rabbawe happening.
I mean, I would show up for you.
Maybe it could be a B and S special.
I'll just be there quiet. I don't think I can sing with her.
All right. So we're going to be talking about insert song here. Red Sari photo shoot, the whole Rains episode, Payal and Akash again make an appearance, and it's Payal's birthday. All of that's good stuff. We are dedicating an episode to it because my co-host demanded it. Having said that, as a wrap up, so B, what did you think of being on the podcast? Would you recommend it to other people who might be feeling unsure about being on it?
This is incredibly fun. I should have done this before. Thank you for letting me jump in. And yeah, 100%. I'd be recommending this to people to join in, to listen to for a serious moment. Like this C-19 pandemic has been an interesting time for all of us that I know. We've isolated ourselves. We've been alone, but it also helped us reconnect with passion. Apparently, my only passion is Pyar Ko Kya Naam Doon. I mean, I used to think differently, but apparently this is my passion because I'm writing again after half a decade. Thank you again. So you know, it's appreciated. But I would say it's a really great way to jog up nostalgia, to revisit something you really loved at that point of time, and seeing it through the eyes of an actual adult. When I first watched it, I was a young adult. I was just starting with life. And I saw certain things in ways which I do not right now. So watching Is Pyar Ko Kya Naam Doon, listening to this podcast and putting it in the framework of my mental growth, maturity, whatever little that is, it's been an interesting, fascinating, and a very fulfilling experience, at least from my end. So I definitely do recommend it.
Yeah, the takeaway from this is that bug your friends to revisit decade-old passions. Yes, I am making this about me because why wouldn't I? S is rolling her eyes at me. Excuse me. I have to put up with you next episode, so I'm preloading some of my chirping. Chirping is a hockey term. I'm sorry. It just means trash talking. I anything to say, S, that isn't yelling at me?
That's Arnav Singh Raizada for you guys. So Ritz talks about murdering herself half of the time.
Look, there are variations. I think I'm a more reasonable Arnav than Arnav himself, so I get a jail-free card when it comes to murder.
Yeah. I have nothing more to say apart from the fact that I am really grateful that I'm speaking to two of my favorite authors, one of who is my dearest friend and the other who is my co-host and my dearest friend. Otherwise I'd get murdered if I do not add the dearest friend at the end of it. But genuinely, as I think B summarized this pretty much well, that it's so nice to revisit something after several years and see it from the eyes of an adult and see it how different your own mind has become and how you tend to appreciate characters that you did not like very much in the beginning and understand other characters. I never thought I would understand Arnav, but now I do. So thank you, B, for being a part of this podcast. I know that we have mostly spoken and barely given you a chance to speak. You are so lovely. We love you a lot. Mwah, mwah, mwah. And before I can give diabetes to anyone else, thank you to all of our listeners for giving your time to this infinitely long podcast. I don't know yet how long this has become, but your patience is admirable.
Yeah, I mean, we covered a lot, so I think we get a little bit of a leeway in terms of the length of this episode. But thank you for listening. Be sure to check it out on the other platforms as well, Spotify, Anchor, etc., etc. We'll post the links in the description, as I mentioned, of the YouTube video. But for now, bye.
Bye.